I thought that people just wrote books and they just wrote it and they just magically knew like all of these things. And it's actually a relief to learn that you don't need to magically have this narration inside of you and like this ability to like know all the beats instinctively.
Yeah, I really thought that too. When I was a kid, it just seems like that's how it was presented. Like you're a writer, you just write the book.
Yeah, nobody's ever like, hey, you need to like read craft books, you need to study craft, you need to revise, you need to share feedback. And, I wish that they had that. I think it's when you're a kid, I don't know about, like you, but like a lot of people, like I know, like everyone was always like, you're so smart, but you shouldn't say you're so smart, right? You should say you're so hardworking. And I want to be a hardworking writer. I don't want to be a smart writer. That's my new motto in life, right? Like, forget about being smart. It's about being hardworking.
Hello, and welcome to So I Wrote a Book, Now What? Where writers chat about writing.
My guest today is Noreen Nanja. She writes stories about family, identity, and love. Her debut novel, The Summers Between Us, comes out in May of this year, and we had a really great chat about the drafting process, the writing process, the rewriting process, and different techniques and tricks that we use to keep ourselves going. So let's get into it. Hi, Noreen. Thank you so much for joining me.
Nicole, thank you for having me.
So what made you decide to write a book?
Probably like a lot of writers, I've always been a big reader. Like as a kid, I was obsessed with the Pony Pals and Sweet Valley and Unicorns of Valinor and all of those like fun things and Twilight and the Hunger Games and Rochelle Mead and all of those things. And so I always was really into books, and I really thought that books were really magical, especially, like growing up as like a second gen immigrant kid trying to navigate, what is it like in the Western society and kind of all of that. And I really found that books gave me a place to escape and a place to learn from. And so I always kind of thought, maybe one day I could write one of these like beautiful, magical things. And it was kind of like, a pipe dream in the back of my head that I kind of always held on to. But I'd write like fan fiction or, try to draft novels without any sense of story structure when I was in high school. And then I kind of put that aside for a while and, focused on other things. Um, and then I wrote another manuscript when I had just like moved cities and I was like trying to learn how to like, cope in a new city, and I needed something to kind of focus on. So I did, Camp NaNoWriMo before NaNoWriMo decided to not be so great. Um, yeah, and it was good for me, like to create structure, like while I was kind of navigating, other things in my personal life. And so I wrote that back in, I want to say like 2014, and I never really like did anything with it. Like I didn't query it, I didn't revise it. It was kind of just like a hey, like like maybe it's not pretty, but you can write something magical too. And then many years later, I guess that would be like it's at 2014. Yeah. So 7 years later, I had just finished like a big exam, for my career. And I kind of was like, you know what, like I've spent so much time working on like stuff that is important and exciting, but like so much of my time in like one area. And I kind of wanted to revisit like what it was like to write a book. And I think also during that time, a lot had changed in the market and in publishing. So like when I was a kid, like the characters weren't like me or like my friends, like it was a different kind of landscape. And so I also like that first manuscript that I wrote also was not of a character who shared my own background. So I felt kind of like, like I had fun writing it and there was a lot of me in there for sure, but it didn't feel like as authentic as maybe I wanted it to be. But kind of the world had shifted quite a bit. And I felt like, okay, you know what, like maybe I can just write a character that is more like me. And it doesn't matter. I didn't expect it to get published, or I didn't expect to even query it or any of those things. I was just like, I'm just going to write for fun for me, and I'll force my friends to read it because that'll be fun. And so I decided to write a book then. And I think it was kind of the most fun and the most hard thing that I've ever done. And I'm really glad I decided to try.
And is that manuscript is that the one that's going to be your debut novel?
And yeah, and that manuscript is going to be my debut novel, though. So that was in 2021, and so that my debut novel will come out in 2025, and so it'll eventually be there, and I can't believe it's that book. That's where it's going to happen.
That's amazing. I have chills. So in 2021, when you sat down to write, did you plot it out or did you just write what came to you?
I did not plot it out, and that was a mistake for me. I just like sat down and tried to write. I didn't realize like that maybe planning would probably be a good thing, because there were so many shifts that happened in that book. Like I went from like one storyline to another. My characters changed names and jobs, and reasons for breakups were like totally different. And yeah, my first draft was extremely, extremely messy. Like it's very, very unlike the book that is hopefully coming out.
Wow. So, what did you do once you had a first draft? Did you go back and revise and come up with all the new ideas that generated what it is now, or did you send it to beta readers right away?
Yeah, so I had like a writing group that kind of came out of Bianca Murray's podcast, like back way back when. And so they saw some of the early pages. And so then I would take that and kind of rewrite based off of that. And then eventually I kind of just like revised the rest of it to kind of fit more of what I was hoping the story to be. And then I sent it to one of my good friends, and my partner also read it. And they're both not writers, but they had some really good feedback and they were loving, but gave appropriate critique. So with that, and with another one of my critique partners' feedback, I rewrote it again. A lot of rewriting has happened to the story.
Yeah, when you say you rewrote it, did you take scenes and like alter them, or did you like scrap it and start from scratch with a basic idea of what it was before and what you wanted it to be?
Yeah, so I kept like rewriting it. And then I was lucky enough to get into a mentorship program in 2022. It's the Word is Diversity Editor Writer Mentorship. And so I was lucky. I got feedback from an editor who works on romance and rom-coms and kind of all of those different types of books. And she gave me really broad level feedback that I took and I rewrote the book again. And I met another great critique partner through that mentorship. And with her critique, and the critique of another mentor as well, I was able to kind of reverse outline and then rewrite the book. And that is more so in the shape of the book that is coming out.
Wow, that's
A
so
lot of
cool.
rewriting.
I'm currently in the middle of a rewrite. I'm 5. I'm losing my mind.
How do you approach the rewriting process?
Oh, well, okay, so I read Matt Bell's book, Refuse to Be Done, and it's an amazing book and I love it. But there is a part in the book, spoiler for everybody, where he says, now throw it all away, like, toss it basically and rewrite the whole book from scratch. He says, like, don't copy and paste even because you are more likely, and sadly, he is right in this, you are more likely to copy and paste a bad line than you are if you're rewriting it. When you rewrite it completely, like it won't be bad the second time if you like can see that. But I think I started that process too soon in the drafting. Because if you start like line level edit type things too soon, like that just might end up in the cut folder.
Mhm, mhm.
I don't know. So I'm still working out a revision process that works for me and doesn't make me want to lose my mind.
I think all of us are there. It was so funny too. Like my partner was just like, "Why do you keep throwing out your entire draft?" And I'm like, "Because you have to, because it's garbage." And and maybe like I think part of it is that I'm harsh on myself too, but like, with as much I feel your pain. Like the rewriting process makes me lose my mind. And I think it's because I do exactly that. Like I throw it out or like I'll have it up on like the side.
Mhm.
But I won't like look at it until I'm stuck kind of to like kind of bring me back. I try to like have
Mhm.
like a reverse outline ahead of me, and otherwise it's just me and my blank screen and like my hair being pulled out, kind of all of those fun things. I don't know. Like I feel like other people have a better process than me, and one day I want to be one of those people. But I'm definitely there with the hair pulling out, like blank screen, frustration.
I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah, I'm there in that pit with you. It's
It's not
always like that with
really
me.
right though. Like it's stronger. It is stronger every time I rewrite it that way. Sadly.
Yeah,
I
well,
want it not to be. I want it to be like copy and paste is great.
oh, I wish, like one day we're gonna get there where we just copy and paste and somehow we pat ourselves on the back and it's done.
Right? And then go watch a baseball game and read a book. Stephen King style.
Maybe the pain makes it better at the end. Type
Maybe.
2 fun, right? It's type 2
Y-
fun.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you know your draft was ready to query?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't even know if my draft was truly ready to query. I was just so sick of it that I decided to query it. I was just like over it. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And, like it had been through quite a few amount of rewrites. I think what I really needed was a good line edit and probably a couple scenes to be tweaked a little bit more because mine is a romance, but there's like a strong like commercial fiction, women's fiction element to it. And I think I needed to like lean a little bit more in that romance area. Um, but yeah, I had tweaked it enough that I was sick of it. So I queried it.
And how did the query process go for you?
So I was lucky. Like it wasn't like overnight or anything like that. It was more like in the number of like months, but kind of concurrently. Through a friend of her friend, I had been linked to the editor who ended up acquiring my book. And so she had taken a look at a couple early drafts. And I think she was also kind of sick of me because I kept being like, oh, don't look at that one. I have another one. Um, and then
Don't you
kind
hate
of
that?
so yeah, so I sent her one of the drafts and I was like mostly sick of it. And I was like, here, you just take it. And then I think I did one more partial revision after that and then decided to start querying it. And so during that process, by the way, she must have been very, very patient because I didn't know really anything about like how that kind of process was working behind the scenes. But she took one of the drafts to acquisitions and it kind of concurrently I was querying. And so it all kind of happened at the same time where I was like, I had gotten like a few full requests. And then she was taking the manuscript to acquisitions kind of after she had like met with me. And so I was lucky with how it kind of all lined up.
So then did you notify the agents that had your fulls that that was happening then?
Yes, I notified them. Some of them got back to me like right away. Obviously, like agents have like pin boxes up to here, so some of them didn't notice it, so I had to like nudge a few times. And then there were some who had requested fulls before, who then like kind of got back to me faster based off of that.
Wow. And then that's the imprint that is publishing your book.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's
So I was
amazing.
really lucky. Yeah, no, so I'm really fortunate with how it kind of all rolled into place.
Yeah, that's so great. When they decided to publish your book, then was there more edits after that? Was it pretty extensive or was it pretty like this is ready to go?
Yeah. So there was I would say like it was not a small edit. I think a lot of it was heavier in terms of like cutting because I like to overwrite. And so I had like a lot of scenes that probably weren't necessary. So we cut a lot of those. We also um did like a more of a heavy line edit because I should have focused more on the line editing piece because in my head I was like, I'm just gonna throw all of this out, so why should I line edit? But the line edit part
Mhm.
was a bit more heavy, and that's something that I think probably I should have done more of before. But yeah, so we kind of edited it really fast in a way because this kind of all happened in the fall of what's the year to this year? The fall of 2023. Like this process has started rolling, and then we had to edit it and kind of get it ready to go to copy edits by the end of the summer 2024.
That's amazing. In your manuscript, there's a dual timeline, and I'm very interested in how that came together and how much that shifted through your editing process.
Oh
This is
yeah, so
hard.
I don't know why I decided to do a timeline. Okay, so I know why I decided to do it because when I was writing it, I was trying to write like just for myself. Like, and I love dual timeline books. Like, I have this like weird like interest in like knowing how people were when they were younger and like why that shapes where they are today. And so I know why I did it. How I did it, I don't know. I think there was a lot that shifted in it. So I kind of wanted to explore like what the main character's life was like as a kid growing up. Like we don't have the same upbringing per se, like we had kind of different lives, but I could put a lot of like like myself into her, like figuring out who she is as a person, like managing like cultural expectations as a child versus like as an adult, kind of exploring some of those pieces. So I wanted it to be kind of exploring her kind of mid adolescence to early adulthood, and then her kind of as a adult now trying to figure out like what she wants in her life, what she wants in her love life, like what she hopes for the future. And so I tried to kind of match that up, but it meant that a lot of a lot of like those some of those scenes were like extraneous because I'm like, you don't need to have random kitchen scenes with a family just talking for fun. Like that doesn't move the plot forward, even though that was fun for me. Um, So it had to be, the edits were a lot about like consciously picking what in the past actually brought the story forward, and like what was just, for me, putting it in a folder for me to like look at later and be like, yeah, but nobody else really needs to read that.
Well, maybe it can be bonus content for your fans.
There we go. Yeah, I like the way of thinking there. But yeah, so that was the big part with the past timeline. I think the present timeline, most of it stayed fairly similar. In edits, like there was obviously things that were tweaked or like things that were developed further so that they would have more impact. But the overall story arc I felt in the present mostly stayed the same, aside from the ending, which was obviously like it's a romance, so happy endings, but had to kind of be reshaped a bit.
Hmm. And did the way that the back and forth works stay the same? Because I'm not sure how yours is structured, like when the past is and when the present is, but is it kind of like woven together, or is it like this happens and then is it all linear?
So I did it alternating. So it's not like back and forth, like chapter to chapter, but there's a lot of chapters that are alternating. And so it'll be like present chapter, past chapter, maybe a couple of present chapters, a past chapter. So I try to integrate that way. Kind of more like, Love and Other Words and Every Summer After in like
Yeah.
style. Yeah.
Did the order of the scenes of the back and forth of the chapters stay the same, or did those switch?
I think they mostly stay the same. There was maybe a couple movements kind of later in the book. I think I wasn't as organized about where I had put those scenes and like where I was thinking about like, the narration and like where it was going, like where you needed the information. So a couple of those in the second half of the book were shifted a little bit so that there was like more space for the present story to kind of take over, and that the past was better at informing the present. So there was a little bit of change there, but mostly it was the same once I got rid of about 20,000 words of extraneous past.
That's so interesting. Like I'm working on a dual timeline right now, and it's really tricky to like figure out where the scenes work best to best, like you said, inform the future timeline and move it all forward. It's tricky. You feel like you could lose your mind moving them around.
I think I lost my mind moving them around. Like a lot of it was I wrote them down in Scrivener. And I used Scrivener a lot because I'm like naturally not an organized person. I don't tell that to people at my work, but yeah, I'm not a very naturally organized person. So the structure of Scrivener really helped me kind of put that all together, because otherwise I'm very like I'm more of like a big picture person, and the nitty gritty of like finding those details, like I had to like specifically think, and like you really lean on that reverse outline and like highlight sections where I'm like, oh yes, like this kind of
Mhm.
dominoes onto that.
Yeah, when you made the reverse outline, was there any kind of beat sheet involved?
So I didn't use a beat sheet like directly on the reverse outline, but every time I do an outline, I keep like I save the cat and the romance in the beat sheet like accessible to me so I can like look at it. And I will brackets like, like this I think is supposed to be the dark night of the soul or whatever, and just remind myself. I don't always line up perfectly, but I
Hmm.
think close enough is what I'm aiming for. And depending on how like how heavy the romance is versus not, like I'll lean more towards one or the other, because
Hmm.
otherwise I'm not organized enough to like remember all that in my head.
Yeah, same.
It's just too hard. Like I thought that people just wrote books and they just wrote it and they just magically knew like all of these things, and it's actually a relief to learn that you don't need to magically have this narration inside of you and like this ability to like know all the beats instinctively. So yeah, no, I have all those stuff out there. I need that
I
support.
really, yeah, I really thought that too. Like it's just kind of like, I don't know, when I was a kid, it just seems like that's how it was presented. Like you're a writer, you just write the book.
Yeah, nobody's ever like, hey, you need to like read craft books, you need to study craft, you need to revise, you need to share feedback. And, I wish that they had that, I think it's like, when you're a kid, I don't know about, like you, but like a lot of people, like I know, like everyone was always like, you're so smart, but you shouldn't say you're so smart, right? You should say you're so hardworking. And I want to
Hmm.
be a hardworking writer. I don't want to be a smart writer. That's my new motto in life. And
That's
also
great.
like,
I love
right,
that because I am, and I'm not.
right, like forget about being smart. It's about being hardworking. And I think putting in the work is what made this book coherent, because it was really not coherent when I thought I was being a smart writer and just going for it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I had to think about that for a minute. Like, let it sink in.
Yeah.
Because it's so true. There's just like a romanticism kind of about the writer and like just writing a book. And part of me is kind of glad that I didn't know all the other stuff that went into it because I don't know if I would have been delusional enough to sit down and do it.
God. No, right? Like you wouldn't. I think like probably honestly what protected me, at least in the initial part of it, was that I had no intention of doing anything with this book. Like I was kind of just like, this is just for me. Because after having written that really like messy draft back in like 2014, I knew how hard it was. And I was like, I knew I wasn't smart, right? I was like, I'm not smart enough to do this, but let's do it one more time to see what happens. And I think storytelling is just, it's like a really fun thing, even if it's really messy at first.
Hmm. You mentioned Romancing the Beat and Save the Cat, Write a Novel. Are there any other craft books that really helped you learn the process?
Yeah, I really like Story Genius. I found that really helpful. And I also really like the Emotion Thesaurus, just in
Hmm.
terms of like on a line level, figuring out like what reaction is my upset character going to have in this moment. Like I seem to do a lot of like eye related things, and like not all my characters can't all have eye twitches, can't have eyebrow raising constantly, can't have furrowing of their eyebrows. Like I need something else, like, to describe why they feel the way they do.
Yeah, my
So
character's not a lot, and I also not a lot, so it
same. And I also like gesture with my hands a lot, and I also raise my eyebrows a lot. But I mean, we all do, right? Like there's only so many gestures that the human body can create.
right.
But I think our characters need to have more variety because otherwise it's kind of boring to be like she was nodding or
Yeah.
she was like
It's
blinking or
a
yeah,
fine balance though, because sometimes I've read books where I'm like, ooh, they were reaching for something else.
right? Oh, my, it was so funny. My editor on mine said that, like your main character is a hot girl with IBS. And I'm like, yes, because my main character was having a lot of stomach reaction to everything happening around her. And I was like, I'm offing
Relatable.
her.
Then a hot girl with IBS, there's nothing.
I know. I was like, you know what? People will relate. Like we
Uh-huh.
all, sometimes have nervous stomachs. So that was, my like emotion thesaurus tend to whip that out and kind of go through here and help my poor character not have to run to the washroom. Like this is where I'm at.
Were there any fiction books that you read that really inspired you to write? You mentioned some that you read when you were a kid. But what about would that you were reading like through your writing process as an adult?
Oh yeah. Yeah, let me just think for a moment here because it's
Sure.
going to be a long list. But I mean, like I'm a big fan of kind of I guess a lot of authors. I think so I read Love and Other Words like when it came out, I think it was in 2019, and I really loved that book. There was like parts that kept like resonating with me and also parts that I felt like had ripped me apart, and I kept like thinking about that feeling. And I feel like that influenced a bit of The Summers Between Us. And so I was thinking so that book kind of was a bit of a, like a inspiration in some ways. And then when I was in my mentorship, I worked with an editor who had worked on Carly Fortune's Every Summer After. So I think Carly Fortune's book came out in 2022. So like the month after I had gotten the mentorship, I think. And she told me to read that book. And I was, because I think it was a similar idea, like a
Hmm.
cottage country dual timeline romance. And so that was another big inspiration in terms of thinking about like the emotional beats. I think Carly does it so well. And I thought that was really inspiring to me. But then also in general, I was just like reading kind of everything. It's like, when you ask the question, you're like, what is your favorite book? And you suddenly can't remember. I was inspired by a lot of like BIPOC romance writers like Nisha Sharma and Farah Heron. And those were people I took a lot of inspiration from. I'm really tempted right now just to pull up my like library list because I have like so many books taken out. Yeah, Samia Dave, like her Well-Behaved Indian Woman and What a Happy Family was really inspired to me, and like thinking about like immigrant family dynamics and like how to like show that through story. That was really something that I thought was really inspiring. And then if you probably look at like lots of the different releases that have come out over the past like 10 years, I probably read a lot of them. I like would read a book like almost every week, so probably I'm definitely missing a lot. Now I feel bad that I can't remember their names.
That's okay. It's hard when you read so much too. Like I always try every year to like keep a list with like the books I read and my thoughts about them. But then when I go to write it, like when I finish a book, I just need another book. Like I don't want to go write about that book.
Yeah,
So I just like
right?
keep going and lose track.
That's yeah, right. Like that's part of it is it's like so easy to lose track of like what you're actually reading, which is I think it's good that, some readers are just so prolific that they don't necessarily remember what they're reading. Um, but yeah, so many different authors were inspirational.
So you queried your novel maybe a teeny bit too soon, you say. And then and then the editor picked it up and took it to acquisitions. So how do you know when your story is done? Like for you in this one, it was probably when the edits were done. But like on future projects, how will you know when to send it?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think I've learned hopefully a lot from this whole process and, having maybe queried a little bit too soon, and still having been fortunate where things have worked out. But I think now I would stop like when I feel like I've gotten it to the best place I have, a thorough line edit has been done. I probably run it by like a trusted like critique partner, see what their thoughts are. Because I mean, you can always tweak. Like books are never, at least I don't think that they're ever fully done. Like I'm sure you give a published author a book and they'll be like, I can't read it again because I'll find this word I want to change, or maybe this paragraph could be shortened or something could be shifted. But I think if I get to the point where I'm just tweaking things that are not making things better, just different, then
Hmm.
that's when I'll tell myself they're done. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I felt at the end of the edits for this book. And I think part of it was because maybe some of it was happening so quickly. Like I was like having to like really work on this book a lot to kind of get it to where I needed to be, but also on a faster timeline that maybe always happens. But I got to a point where I was like, okay, now we're just like I'm just picking words that are almost the same and moving them around and like moving one sentence up and one sentence down, and I no longer can tell what I'm reading. And I even made some like changes that actually like in hindsight like didn't make sense and I had to change them back because I just looked at it so much. So I think that's when I would say
Hmm.
it's actually done for me.
Yeah, I've been there.
Right. And you know what? Like sometimes you're wrong and it's not done, or sometimes it is done and you're just like beating this book that's finished for no reason. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's a learning process in some ways
Yeah.
for me to know when things are done.
What are you working on right now?
So right now I'm working on like workshopping a couple ideas for my second book. Um, all are going to be like romances and have happy endings, which is always exciting. But yeah, I'm kind of like trying to figure out where to go next.
How do you present those to your agent not being an innate plotter?
Yeah, so that is a thing that I really had to work on and learn. And so, like as part of presenting an idea, I don't just provide a pitch, but also a synopsis. And then I think also like kind of moving forward, if there's enough time and space, like the ideal would be to have like a full proposal ready. So you'd have like your first three chapters and a synopsis and a pitch. So I've had to learn, and I'm still learning how to write like a coherent synopsis for a book that's not written. And I think that's actually really hard for me. But now that I know the beats a little bit better, I hope that it'll come more clearly. So I've written a couple synopses of these ideas, and I try to keep it not like specific scene by scene because I don't think that's actually as important, at least for like an editor or an agent, unless they specifically request it to see like where the story is going and like what it's going to hit. So I focus really more on like the cause and effect of like the emotions and trying to bring the actions of the book into it, or like the plot and like how it's going to affect the cause and effect of the emotional journey of the characters, especially in a romance, at least, maybe not in every kind of book. So that's what I'm working on. And yeah, I think it's hard. I don't know if it will all stay the same like after I start drafting. My hope is that it'll at least hit similar beats.
Hmm.
But when I look at like what other authors are doing, like some people seem to be really good about sticking to their synopsis, but other people say that they change a lot as they actually go through the book. So I'm hoping that there will be some flexibility in case I
Yeah,
get my synopsis wrong.
I'm sure there will be. I follow Andrea Bartz on her Instagram, and she obviously has to do the same thing where she writes the synopsis, but she is also not a plotter. And so hers was changing so much. And then it was like close to her deadline, and she was changing the mid plot point. And I was like, ah! Just watching it was giving me a lot of anxiety. But it seems like that happens. I mean, you can't, the book has to kind of be written, you know? however it needs to be written.
Right. And I mean, the way I would think about it, right, is like, I feel like editing is like a dialogue, like the editor is having a dialogue with you in your story. So, like, maybe your dialogue is saying that maybe you'll go this way, and maybe they'll come back with a compromise and you can shift the story so that it, meets your shared vision. So, but
Hmm.
I think it's really hard for me to stick exactly to the plot. Though I will say that once I have a book and I have a reverse outline that actually makes sense, that reverse outline I can generally stick to. So maybe it's just actually forming the full book, and then I can be a proper plotter,
That makes
right?
sense. Yeah.
I guess a pantser maybe. Like I don't think I'll ever
Yeah.
sit down again and just pants a book. Like I think I'll always have some sort of outline, even if
Hmm.
it's like a rough outline, of like just the big beats. But I also don't think I'm going to be able to draft a book with like clear scene by scene outlines, at least not yet. I'm not at that place at this point in my writing journey where I can do that. Maybe I never will be because maybe that's just not who I am. But I think when I rewrite the book, that's when my plotting hat comes out better, looks
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
Did you ever receive, so you were mentioning how like the feedback with the editor is a dialogue. Did you ever receive feedback that you disagreed with? And
Uh,
like, how did that work?
Yeah, I think I was lucky in the editorial process where the feedback that I've generally gotten has resonated, at least with my editor. I've gotten feedback before in like writing groups and stuff like that where maybe there's been some disagreement, but people generally would provide it very sensitively, and we don't always have the same, taste or the same vision. And so there were times where I would have to kind of disregard feedback, and try to understand like maybe why they gave the feedback and figure out another way to address it, but not necessarily change everything just because somebody said to change it, which has been hard too, because I think my instinct is to be like, this book needs to be thrown out. So if you're saying this, it means I should throw this whole chapter out. But maybe it's more that this chapter just needs to have some more action in it, or this chapter needs to have some more emotional development. And that's why you didn't like this chapter, but not necessarily your specific feedback about the chapter. Like, I don't like this chapter because this character is grumpy. Maybe
Hmm.
isn't like I don't have to like delete the character or like change the character's personality, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, of trying to get to the root of why the feedback is there. It's so hard to know sometimes what feedback to take and what feedback to disregard.
Yeah, I think so. I've had some like I've had some feedback where it didn't feel like they understood the story or the vision for the story. But they also might not have been somebody who would have picked up my book in the first place if I think about it that way. And that feedback, I think, you know, initially when I first would get feedback like that, I would take it more to heart and be like, this, like, my story sucks, like, a lot of like internal aberration. I think now, like, I've gotten to the point to just be like, you know what, like, I probably have different tastes than you, and you probably would never pick up my book, like, if this wasn't part of a writing group. And so maybe that's why we don't gel.
Right.
But
Yeah.
generally, I've been really lucky with the people who've given me feedback for sure.
Yeah. So when your book is published, are you going to read your reviews?
I don't think I want to read my reviews. I I know like everybody has a different relationship with reviews. I feel like initially I'm going to be like, let me look at it because I'm curious. But I think once my book is actually out, I'm just going to like block my book page and not worry about it and just have like a friend send me like the positive reviews maybe, or like because it's like a reader space. Like I don't want to be in there. And if I'm morbidly curious, I can just get somebody to like show it to me, so I have emotional support should I want to go weep in a corner. But yeah, I don't want to like focus too much on it because I feel like it'll get in my head when I'm trying to like draft something new and just like enjoy
Hmm.
myself. And everybody engages with text differently, right? Like what's somebody's favorite book can be somebody else's like least favorite book, or like a book they don't finish. So I shouldn't take it personally. It's just, it's how the book is interacting with the world, however it decides to interact.
It's nice to think of it as its own thing then.
It's like a book baby. It's going out
Yeah.
into the world, and I
Yeah.
can't control it. I have to be a good parent and let it go.
Yeah. Let it spread its wings and fly.
I'm manifesting that I do this. This is my goal. Let my book out and say goodbye. Can come home for
That's
coffee if it wants.
right. That's a great goal. I think that's a wonderful goal.
It's all grown
Um,
up.
yeah, all grown up. So you have a full-time job and a life. So when do you find time now to write?
So I aspire to be a morning writer, but I'm not. My favorite time to write is between 9 to 11, which obviously does not happen, like 9 to 11 a.m., which cannot happen when I'm at work, obviously, because there's only one of me and that one of me has to be working. So usually what I do is I will work on my stuff in the evening after dinner. Yeah. And then if I have like a day off, because sometimes I like work weekends, so I might have a day off on a weekday, then I will go to a coffee shop from 9 to 11 and have a fancy writing day where I get a latte and like get to sit there and write. And I love those days because they're the days where I feel like I'm most productive because those are my best hours, are kind of the 9 to 11. Is like, if you want me to be productive, like that is when I need to be working. And so actually during edits, I took a few days off around then when I was like coming up to the deadline because that was when I was like mentally the most there. But otherwise, it's been more of an evening thing and a weekend activity.
And then do you set yourself a word count goal, or how do you progress through a draft?
Yes. So I do try to set a word count goal, but if I'm too ambitious with the word count goal, I psych myself out. So if I'm not like on a very tight timeline, I'll say 1,000 words because that's something I can definitely meet. It's not too taxing. Like if I do my coffee shop thing from 9 to 11, like I'll have 1,000 words. That's totally fine. But if I'm more tightly pressed, then I try to aim for 2,000 a day, but I don't know if I don't always meet it. And then I like kind of beat myself up a bit. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a catch 22. I feel like I'm faster at revising than I am at drafting because I think drafting leaves a lot of room for self-doubt. Like when you have the blank page in front of you and you're still figuring out the story and you know your sentences have a lot of passive voice in them, it's easy for me to be like, this is not, going the way I want it to go. And so I'm slow because I think a lot of that internal doubt sometimes, which a coffee at 9 to 11 a.m. at a nice coffee shop seems to take away. So manifesting that, but no, yeah. So I try to like do 1 to 2,000 words a day.
Yeah, that's a good goal. I usually try to do one because that seems like really doable to me. When I first started, I would do 200 a day because I was like, I can write 200 words. That is fine. And it went
Yeah, no,
really
I've
slow.
I've sometimes I'll be like 100 a day. Like when I actually was drafting this, like initially, I was just like, just do 100 a day. I was doing it on my Google Docs, like on my phone, like when I was commuting.
Hmm.
It was yeah, it was just like you're writing whatever. If you write 100 words, if they're all garbage, that's fine. Just do it.
Hmm.
And it works,
Hmm.
eh? Like sure, I had to rewrite it a bunch of times, but it like broke that mental barrier, I think, like making it
Hmm.
something that was very doable and easy.
Yeah, because when you look at the whole scope of it, it can be very intimidating. Like, I think that's why revising is so intimidating to me because
Mhm.
you have the whole book. Like, there's so much of it. There's so many words in there.
It's like a chunk that's like I know, like it's overwhelming. Like it's like 80,000 words. Like how many
Yeah.
words is that? Like it takes hours to read
Oh.
that many words out loud?
Yeah. Do you read your work out loud?
Sometimes when I am trying to line edit because I feel like because you've seen the word so many times and like to you they make sense. Like it might be a very strange sentence combination you've created, but to you like it makes sense. Like I remember there was one that I like clung on to for so long because to me on the paper it looked beautiful, and then I read it out loud finally during one of my like later rounds of line edits, and I'm like, why do I keep doing this? Like three people have told me to get rid of it. Why am I clinging on to this? It does sound ridiculous. And so then I would make the change. But I don't read the whole thing out loud, just like sections where I'm like questioning whether or not it's working or not, because otherwise I get tired and stop.
Hmm. Yeah.
Do you read your work out loud?
I have Microsoft Word has an app and it will read to you. And so I have it read it to me, but it recently updated the app so the voice sounds really cool. It
Oh yeah.
sounds almost like a real audiobook, and then I find it doesn't work as well for me to catch mistakes. Um, so then I started having Kindle read it to me because they still have like a pretty robot voice,
Mhm.
and I catch mistakes much better with a robot voice because everything sounds kind of terrible with a robot voice. So if something's like truly terrible or like not working, you can't hide.
No, but like a good narrator can hide it, right? So I
Yeah,
guess like
totally.
their update must be like way better and can just make
It
whatever
is.
sound fluid.
I'm like, this sounds cool. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, this is great. I mean, you know what? That's a good thing though, because like your audience will not be hearing it from a robot voice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take that. So even if I've missed some of those things, there's no robot voice delivering them for them to catch it. I'm going to actually try that. I've been using my own voice, but it's because I hate the robot voice. But I think maybe I just need to bite the bullet.
Yeah, I also hate the robot voice. So it's like a much more enjoyable thing to listen to it through Microsoft Word,
Yeah.
but I catch more if I do it through the accessibility feature on my phone and do speak screen and make Kindle read it to me.
Okay. I'm going to try that actually because I think I am too nice sometimes to myself and
Yeah.
try to take the easy
I
way.
don't think you are.
But no, but like you know what I mean, right? Like, you get to that point when you're revising and you're just like, I just
Mhm.
don't feel like doing this anymore. And maybe I just need to like push through the robot voice. Or maybe
Yeah,
it'll make it more efficient too, right? Because maybe I'll catch it quicker.
yeah. After a while, you don't even notice the robot voice. Like, you still notice the things that are wrong, but the robot voice is less like, I can't do this.
The robot gets in your head. Like
Yeah.
okay. I'm gonna try that actually with my next one. We'll see how it goes. Because I feel like this one, because I had read it so many times before, like when I finally started reading it out loud, I bet you I missed a bunch of things. I'm sure it was fine, but I just mean like, it might be more of an efficient way to catch the errors before it's too late.
hmm Yeah. It's one way to do it. I don't know.
You know what? Like you have to experiment.
Yeah. It's still quite an unwieldy beast sometimes.
At what stage do you start to listen to the robot in your revision process?
Like pretty far into it. Like draft 3 at least. Like I've gotten beta reader feedback and I've applied what resonates to me, and then I'll usually have the robot voice talk to me about it.
So you're like your next beta reader is the robot.
Yeah.
You know
And
what?
then
It's like, oh, go
it's
ahead,
kind of
yeah.
nice though, because if you do it on the Kindle, right, you can just make comments when you're like, this is crazy. Um, but then it doesn't change it right away. So you
Yeah.
still have to go in and be like, is that crazy?
Like
Yeah.
I recently got an e-ink tablet where my writing
Ooh.
is terrible, so it doesn't do a good like conversion. But yeah, like I kind of have used that to make annotations and things like that, and it's the same where I have to go back in and do it. But I think that actually works well because then you have more time to kind of like sit with your thoughts rather than make the change like right then and there and pause what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's
but yeah, that
really cool.
it also apparently I think it also has a voice text thing. I need to check that part out. I've mostly just been using it because I get too distracted sometimes on my laptop because there's so many things you can do, and I just needed something that like context, like like how you have like things that are context dependent. Like today I had my like maybe for me like it's like coffee at like the coffee shop that like cues me in that this is writing. So like I tried to
Mm-hmm.
create something where I don't have to like exit the house and like spend money on coffee at a time where it doesn't make sense to like feel like writing. So like having that like e-ink tablet as like a mental cue to like I'm gonna work on like revising or like writing using this. So I'm trying to
So
make
will
that.
you handwrite on the tablet then?
I am like not like handwriting the whole thing. It's more just like kind of putting down like my rough outline onto it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think if I write the whole thing that way, because my writing is like really quite atrocious, it'll be very painful for me after. But having like the big, like, like maybe some dialogue and the idea of the scene, and then I can like write it has been helpful because otherwise I find I get really distracted at that stage when I'm on my computer because I have like WhatsApp open and I have the intranet and I have messages and like all of these other things coming in and I'm not the type of person who can put on, like a no internet blocker onto my computer. Like I don't have that kind of self-control. The e-ink tablet, like it has internet, but it's not like the most like nice way to browse the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives me that forced like, self-control. It controls
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Totally. And it kind of like, I think all these different ways of doing it kind of accesses a different part of your brain that
Mhm.
kind of helps you think about the story that you've read 10 billion times in a new way, which at a certain point is really hard to do.
Yeah, I think so. And I actually got the idea when I was visiting my family and they were like clearing out their house and I found some like books that I wrote when I was like 5 or 6 and they were handwritten and I was like because like jog that memory and I was like I should try this but not on paper because I'm gonna lose paper. Um like I have the stacks of paper in my house for various reasons, from like school and like work and all of those things. And I was like, this paper is going to get lost. It's going to be illegible. So I'm just going to do it on an e-ink tablet. So that was my excuse for why I bought that. But it is working. It was worth it. It was
Yeah,
worth it. Yeah.
I love it. I sometimes will handwrite sections or like handwrite parts of things, but I do like I'm chaotic about it. And so it's like it's on a post-it, it's on a notebook, it's in this notebook. So I've never lost something because I usually transcribe it pretty quickly after, but there's the threat that it will get lost.
It's like the thread will get lost. It's the thread of like, will you remember which scene this was supposed to be? Because yeah, I did the same thing. It'll be like on like a back of like other paper I was using for something else, or like I have a notebook, but that notebook also has something else in it, and then I won't remember. And I have so many notebooks, they all look the same. So then, if I'm trying to organize myself later, I might put it away, and then I have to find anyways, like how it goes.
Mhm.
Justifying this like purchase very hard.
Yeah, I do know how it goes. Because I'm surrounded right now by like 10 million posters. Maybe I should get an e-ink tablet.
You know what? I enable it. I totally enable it. It was very fun. It also feels fun to like write because it's like all scratchy and I think it could be worth it if you like handwriting and you find it helpful to have some different kind of tools to use to write.
Yeah.
So
What
for me that
brand
was
did
my
you
excuse.
get, just out of curiosity?
I got the Onyx Books one.
Okay, I'm gonna look it up.
I've heard good things about Remarkable, but I heard they had a cloud-based subscription, so I wasn't in the mood
Mm-hmm.
for that. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think Supernote was supposed to have a new one come out, so I was actually considering that one, but their second one, it was supposed to come out like ages ago, and it has not come out yet. And so I
Huh.
decided just to get the Books because it was like a reasonable price too.
Yeah.
I got the one that doesn't have the backlight, so it's just the e-ink. But some people
Mm-hmm.
like a backlight, but I wanted something where I was forced to not like use it for other things, and this was
Right.
perfect for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your writing process and your writing journey with us. Do you have anything else that you would like to share?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was lots of fun. I guess you can find me at Noreen Nanja Writes on Instagram, and also on Threads. And I'm at Noreen Nanja on Blue Sky. And my debut is coming out in May of 2025, and it's called The Summers Between Us. Yay!
Yay! And I'll link all of your stuff, everything in the show notes too. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you all so much for being here. Now go write.